Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, a show for people who are obsessed with all things marketing. I'm your host, Veronica Rami, certified master marketer, international keynote speaker, workshop facilitator, and the author of a new book called Identity Marketing. Each week, I interview rainmakers from brands big and small to pull back the curtain on what's actually working in marketing today. We dig into real life wins and losses, and there's very real consequences, and get into spicy discussions of marketing controversies and opposing philosophies. This is the real marketing thought leadership you've been looking for in your ears on demand. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. I think you know by now that identity marketing is my thing. I literally wrote a book that's coming out in January on this. However, with all great marketing is opposition. For every ethical marketer, there might be 20 unethical marketers. And so I knew before I officially published my book that I needed to have a cautionary chapter on how not to do identity marketing and how to avoid unethical tactics, gimmicks, that anybody could take the lessons of the book and exploit it. And so in doing so, I invited my personal friend, but also one of the smartest humans I've ever met, Kelly Ruta, to the podcast, former clinical psychotherapist and CEO who works with other CEOs, to have a really honest, meaningful conversation around how shady black hat in the gray zone marketing practitioners will use some of these key attributes or key techniques to get and manipulate good people. And she outlined actually four or five really, really spot on red flags for any smart consumer to avoid if they were to see them. And I thought the conversation was super meaty and it literally contributed to the book. And so before the book comes out, you now have a chance to preview. Probably one of the most important sections of the book is how not to abuse identity marketing. So please welcome my guest, Kelly Ruta. Kelly, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I think it's ridiculous on my part that it took me this damn long to have you on the podcast because we are actual friends in real life, see each other quite frequently because we both live in the state of North Carolina, talk to each other even more frequently on Voxer. You're one of my most favorite humans in the whole world. And the fact that it's taken me this long to have you on this podcast is stupid.
I think we're just lucky we get to hang in real life.
Yes,
so, I mean, I think that's what it is.
Yes, true. It is true. And I'm also bad at taking pictures of our cool dinners. And that's just because I really enjoy being present with my friends.
Same.
And so here we are. Okay. Actually, this conversation, the reason you're even on the podcast is because you had one of your glorious, take down moments at dinner and like, damn. So let me catch you up. Me and Kelly both live in North Carolina. And because we hang out with each other, we're like, well, we should do this more frequently. And then we're like, oh, I know this cool person. I know. And all of a sudden it's now turned into this thing where once a month we all go to dinner with cool women in the local area.
Yeah.
And so that's what just happened. We just had our monthly dinner. And I, as you know, am writing a book called Identity Marketing, which is helping, hopefully, in my opinion, helping ethical marketers, salespeople, professional business leaders create identities that their people can, like their audience, their customers can self-identify as. And then it really means something deeply to them, whether it's Taylor Swift Swiftie or Harley Hog or whatever. And so I'm teaching people literally how to do this. However, you and I both know that people also exploit this.
Yes.
For really naughty behavior. And that's what you weren't talking about me specifically, but you were having one of those moments at dinner because I think really how the ball even started was there was a conversation around how disqualified or unqualified coaches are doing more harm than good. And then you brought up and one of their techniques is identity. And I'm like, what? So I literally have a section of the book that's like how not to do this. And I'm like, damn it, I really want to explore this with Kelly because you are, well, let's talk about your credentials and then I want you to just start rolling. So go.
Sure. So I started off, my first career was as a clinical psychotherapist.
Mm-hmm.
So I did a chunk of time in public schools doing mental health and substance abuse counseling. And then I had a private practice when I lived in New Jersey, and now in North Carolina, I had a private practice here. So my career was 20 years. And in my practice, I did what I like to say, 50% sort of general issues, anxiety, depression, relationships, that kind of stuff. And I did 50% addictions and eating disorders. So I had a specialty. And then I had a general practice. So I did that for 20 years and then started the current business that I have as can I be honest and just say, I don't even like calling myself a coach. Like,
No,
I truly
please.
feel like too many people pee in that pool. And that's why I don't like
It's been polluted.
it is, and it's terrible. But
Yeah.
for all, intents and purposes, whatever. I'm a coach, I'm a keynote speaker, expert presenter, yada, yada. And I do a lot of deep identity work with leaders and their teams.
Yes, you're really good at this.
So that they can do what's necessary to move the business towards their vision.
Totally.
And so I took so much of the first 20 years and my education and my training and all the things that I needed to be able to do that work. And I brought it with me into the coaching industry, specifically to work with female entrepreneurs and their teams.
Sister.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know it's funny. I wish that the term coach was more of a badge of honor like it used to be, but then you have all of these non-certified, non-experienced, barely experienced in one experience in their lives, and then they feel like they're qualified to talk about it. So unfortunately the coaching space has become sad. It's a sad place. And I was just having this conversation with Selena Sue about a coach that really, really hurt me. Like, I spent 2 years in her inner sanctum, and how it went down at the end was so painful, such a betrayal. And then I got my lawyer involved because she's like, well, technically the way that she wrote this agreement is she feels like she's co-owner of some of the ideas that you created while you were in her sanctum. I'm like, what? And so it just, I'm not unique. I've in hanging out with our friends and colleagues and very high achieving, high visible people. This is not an uncommon story.
No.
And it really pisses you off.
It really does.
Yeah, it does. Why for you in particular does it really just
for several reasons, but really truly because I was not trained as a coach, and a lot of coaches are trained how to make money first. I was trained how to do no harm first. The make money was the last part. Yeah. So my values lined up with my training and my habits in how I work with people all start with, how do I make sure that no harm is done to this person, right? And it's not about perfection. It's about best practices, and it is about peer-reviewed science in your work. And so I see an alarming lack of training in coaches. It's not that they're not even necessarily certified. It's that the certifications are a joke. I was speaking recently to someone who was on the original board for the ICF, the International Coaching Federation. And she is so horrified by what they are currently doing that she's been reaching out and having conversations with them to say, this is not what we envisioned for this organization.
How we started.
This is so out of integrity. And that's the second piece for me, is my values are not up for purchase. They are not. And so if I lose money because I practice integrity, so be it.
So be it.
So be it. But that is not something that I see, especially in the online space. I see less of it in things like executive coaching. I have a lot of friends who work with large companies and such, but in the online space, that is the Wild West, and it is frightening to me. So that's what gets me fired up, because then behind the scenes, I get people like you, wonderful, brilliant, strong, talented, intelligent women who have been burned by somebody whose real focus was on the lifetime value of you as a customer or a client, and not on the value of the work that was being done. And so one without the other causes a massive imbalance, and then it puts the client or the customer in a very vulnerable position. And by the time they get to somebody like me, they're so gun shy, they are so lacking in trust. There might even be some trauma as a result that it makes my job very difficult because I
Yeah.
have to go 10 extra miles to earn that person's trust, but I will do that because they deserve that and I want to do the work with them, right?
Yeah.
But the lack of training paired with extremely unethical, manipulative marketing practices has created a monster in the online space.
Mm. Mm, mm, mm,
Yeah,
mm. I'll be honest. So I'm just vulnerable moment, just full, like, I'm just gonna be honest. Like,
please.
because of what I went through, I am running away from similar stuff, similar containers, right? So whether it's a group program, mastermind, like I can tell that I have an adversity to this, anything that reminds me of the same type of playground that I felt like I thought I was safe in, but I wasn't safe in. It was predatory. So now I don't want to even play on a playground, if I'm using that analogy.
Yeah.
And I instantly have, I mean, talk about like icy walls that pop up when somebody's like, oh, I help people do XYZ. I'm like, I'm sure you do.
Yep.
Like and again, that's not, I don't want to be hard on myself because that is literally self-defense. Like I understand why that part shows up for me because she's in my service to care for me and protect me and guard me and not make that same mistake.
Correct.
But then the con of that is that like, I rarely open myself up to anybody in that particular category. I'd rather work with like a therapist who has nothing to do with the online industry than to work with somebody who comes from the space that has become so corrupted and polluted.
That's the number one reason when I ask people, what made you choose me instead of somebody else?
Yep.
That's the number one reason they say they chose me, because my former career was as a therapist. So they know that the training and the requirements to follow a particular set of professional ethics and the required continued training is really rigorous. Yeah. And so I think that's what allows them to have just that extra, okay, I'm going to put myself out there and it feels risky, but this feels like I'm safeguarded more. Mm-hmm. So I completely understand why you feel like that. I'm sure I would feel the same way. Mm-hmm. And here's the kicker. So we're talking about women like us, right? Mm-hmm. Smart. We have worked really hard. We do not suffer fools. We're not, all of that. And when something like that happens, the real wound is that it has eroded our trust in our own judgment.
I knew you were going there. I knew it. Yep. Say it again.
I'm not saying that the external trust factor isn't a problem. Obviously, we want to be very discerning and rebuild that, right? But it's, as women, I find so often one of our biggest hurdles is trusting ourselves, because the system basically is set up for self-doubt to flourish with us, right? So when you have an experience like that, where you chose someone and you felt strongly about it and you were probably very excited about it and seeing all the possibilities, and Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right at the top is self-actualization. And that's one of the draws of programs like this, is the marketing to the person you want to become. That's not problematic marketing unless you're not actually doing that.
Yep.
Right? Yep. So that's the real wound, is we walk away and we go, if I'm so smart, how did that happen?
Well, especially if I pride myself on being a really good bullshit detector, people reader. I have a high level of discernment, and then how the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
How did this happen? Or more important, like the double wound or the double, punishment is like, how did I let this happen for so long? Like, I was there for 2 years. Like, what the fuck? Like, I renewed.
The fire rising. I feel it rising.
I renewed. Yeah. So like, even more shame or self-shame of like, damn, how did I get this far?
And I can answer that.
Tell me.
I can answer that. And this is such a powerful conversation. I could do like an all-day workshop on this. So I'll try to be succinct. There's a lot here, is basically what I'm trying to say. But what it boils down to is that marketing, ethical and non-ethical, use some of the same tactics that people who run cults use. Some of it is fine. Some of it is absolutely manipulative and toxic. And sometimes you can't tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
So there are cults, and then there's marketing that's cult-ish.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay. So I want you to think about in your head, whether you're listening right now or it's UV, like think in your head of a brand who does really outstanding marketing, especially
Mm-hmm.
a personal brand.
Mm-hmm.
And think of a brand who does really, really convincing marketing, but
Mm-hmm.
what's behind the marketing is really toxic. Okay. So like
Mm-hmm.
just pull up 2 examples in your mind.
Got it.
Usually, what do we see? A charismatic face of the
Yes.
business or leader.
Yes.
Typically has a very strong personality, doesn't have to be soft or hard, but a quite a presence, right? A commanding presence. The business typically targets vulnerable people. Well, that's my business. That's your business. That's most of the
Sure.
businesses I know. Why? Because vulnerable people are in need of something. So
Okay.
that's
Yep.
not technically a bad thing. It can just be used for bad reasons.
Okay.
All right, stay with me. There is almost always baked in this very powerful sense of community. And we see this through branding and merch and language. Like you mentioned Harley Davidson. They're called
Yeah.
hogs for a
The
reason,
hogs.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Swifties.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but we see coaches doing this all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they do it well, sometimes they don't. And the
Mm-hmm.
reason is because psychologically, you want to be able to identify an insider and an outsider. And we all are wired to want to be on the inside, not the
Mm-hmm.
outside,
Mm-hmm.
right? But where we start to see things go, well, actually, let me name one more thing. So the word fan comes from fanatical. That's where the word comes from. When you think of the word fan, I think of the Swifties, right? And it's fun and it's positive and it's a
Yeah.
community and there's the bracelets and all the things. Like it's really uplifting. But the word fanatical, that's not actually typically what it means when somebody uses it. That's why
Mm-hmm.
fan is a much more palatable word. Cults are fanatical, and
Mm-hmm.
people who use cult-ish tactics want a fanatical fan base. And a fanatical fan base is about identity. And once you identify as a fan, it is very difficult to not identify as that fan anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Very, very difficult. So, what do we start to see from the businesses and the business owners who are doing this in a really unethical manner? Okay, number one, they use emotional manipulation tactics. You didn't get the results because you didn't work hard enough. Oh, and by the way, you need to be in my next level program because clearly the lower level program is not for you. Okay, we see guilt, lots of guilt. You must not want this
Ooh.
enough. I know that one just makes me nauseous, even giving it as an example.
Yeah.
They manipulate FOMO to an unhealthy degree. Some degree of FOMO is fine, right? Taylor Swift wants her people to buy her tickets and be at the shows, be on the Eras tour, of course.
Yeah.
But this is fear that is jacked up to a level where the person deep down believes if I leave this, it will be at a significant loss to me. I will be out. The people will cut me out. They will talk about me behind my back. They will badmouth my brand or my business, blah, blah, blah. Those kinds of things, okay? We also see lots of gaslighting. So if you are the coachee, the client, and you step forward and say, hey, I'd like to talk to you about our last interaction because that didn't really feel good to me. Or I'd like to talk about how that retreat went because it wasn't as advertised or something along those lines. And you step forward to say something, and the charismatic leader or his or her frontline representatives, because oftentimes you have to jump hoops to get to the person,
Yeah.
right? They gaslight you and say, that's not what happened. That it didn't happen that way. You must be remembering that wrong. or you're being sensitive, or something like, I'm sorry that you think you experienced it that way. So really what
Ooh.
it is this emotional tactic to really impact somebody's perception of reality. That's what gaslighting is. It actually comes from a play in the 1930s called Gaslight. That's the whole thing was about, was a husband who isolated his wife so he could control her. And that's where gaslighting comes from. Okay? So we see a lot of that. We see the face of the brand being intolerant, completely intolerant of criticism. They get criticized, so they delete comments. They take posts down. They pull their video down, but not because they want to replace it with an apology video. They say, oh, that was actually really in poor taste, or I did not handle that well. I don't mean it that way. They just pull it down because they don't want any more comments, right? They also cannot handle being questioned, right? So when you say, the way you coached me last week, I was left feeling like you were blaming me a little bit. And you say something along the lines, can you help me understand, where you were coming from so we can get
Mhm.
back on the same page?
Mhm.
Because I have a little shame about that, or I'm a bit angry with you about that. And the person absolutely cannot handle being questioned, versus leans in and says, that was not my intention, but I'm partially responsible for this. So tell me more. Let's talk about this,
Mhm.
right? They can't handle that. And they really manipulate this deep desire that so many of us have to really self actualize and better ourselves. So we see this in religious cults. We see this in
Yeah.
political,
Yeah.
identity politics. We see this in
Yeah.
some social cults. We see this in MLMs. It is
Yeah.
all baked into MLMs. And so that promise is there, but what happens on the way to the promise will ensure that you never self actualize and therefore always need them. So you renew and you renew and you renew because the conclusion is it must be me.
I have so many thoughts.
I could go on
Okay.
and on, but I feel like
No, no,
that's
no.
enough.
Well, so first things, my hair just went wild because I like went like first things first. This is wildly validating. I hope not only me listening to you, I'm like, this happened and this happened. Like I could just recall so many stories of like, yep, 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 check all of the above. And I'm sure anybody who's listening to this podcast is probably gonna feel like, holy hell, like, yes, me too. Like I just, it's funny. For example, the two things that really got me was when you were like, and then if you ever leave their programs, like you're dead to them, you're cut
Yep,
off because you were never valuable in the first place outside of your customer lifetime value. The experience that I talked about earlier, I remember one of the individuals, he told me, he's like, no, I'm close with her and I'm unlike other members because she kind of let me in a little bit closer. And so I consider her to be a friend. And then as soon as he left the program, she like no longer speaks to him.
absolutely. Happens
And
all the time.
it really hurt his feelings because he thought he wasn't like everybody else in the program. And I one of the things that I tell people that have joined me in the Rainmaker residency programs or other things I've done, I'm like, once a chick, always a chick. Like I just consider you my own, like no matter if you pay me or not. Like it's just, I can't not, the relationship doesn't end because you stop paying
Yep,
me.
yep.
But I thought, I don't know. I realized, I think I didn't give myself credit for that because I just did it intuitively or just because I'm relationship oriented. But I just pulled up, I'm not going to disclose who because that would not be kind on this podcast, but I recently paid a coach. I think I spent $1,500 for like an hour of time or something. And I'm a straight A student. So like I did all this prep work and whatever you need, I got it. So that it makes the most of our time together. And the call did not go well. Like it just felt like she was just like filling the time, stretching the time, milking it. Like she wasn't giving me anything valuable. She kept on asking for more context, but I already supplied all the context. I was getting really frustrated. And so, because I learned from my previous experience, I then voxed this coach like a 4 minute, 25-minute vox saying, like, hey, just so you understand how I'm feeling the next day, I just want to be fully honest. I'm really frustrated that we spent the majority of that paid time call giving you more history and context when I felt like I had already provided that. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't feel like I got the value from our time together. And I really, really was looking forward to it. And she just messaged me, appreciate your feedback. Thank you. That was it. That was it. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like it was so, I was like, damn, no extreme ownership, no, like nothing, no follow-up, nothing,
And
literally
that's one of the
nothing.
other factors to be looking for
Yes.
is a lack of accountability, because
Oh,
look,
dude.
none of us is perfect, and sometimes we show up
Yes.
and we don't mean to not do our best work, but for whatever
Yes.
reason we
It's
didn't
a
do our
bad
best
day. Yes.
work. So the
Yes.
key, like in that situation, if that was me,
Yeah.
you would either be getting your money back or
Yeah.
you would be invited to another 90-minute
Redo.
call.
Yeah. Redo.
Like
I've done that before too.
this is a no-brainer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
100%.
that's because I'm not a narcissist and neither
Okay.
are you.
No, I know. Okay. Let's tell the people what happened. So the same dinner, I like had a moment like, oh my gosh, am I a narcissist? And the only reason I say this is because one of my really good friends who's also been on this podcast, Dr. Greg Botero, he's, a psychotherapist. He's fantastic. He's brilliant. He was talking about like very oftentimes when you walk into these mastermind groups or these like high performing containers of like 7-figure, 8-figure, all these people, he's like, the reason that everybody's in that position to have that type of achievement is because you have to be so unapologetic about your own worldview, and you have to be unapologetic about your belief in self and your idea and your products. If not, you wouldn't even make it
Right.
because it's so brutal out there.
Right.
And so he was saying, he's like, like really most people in the room are going to be a level of narcissism or narcissist. And so then I like, that scared the shit out of me because I'm like, no, like I'm not a narcissist. And I've worked with so many big brands that I would like to think that these individuals were really kind and humble at one point. I don't know where in their journey they sold out or they sold their soul and they became this raging narcissist, because I thought narcissists are developed at 3. So then I had this like moment. So I said, Kelly, am I a narcissist? And she's like, no, the fact that you're even asking means you're not a narcissist.
It's like when people in therapy would say to me, am I crazy? And I'm like, no, I've literally worked with certifiable people. They don't ask that question. That's not the way that works.
No, but it is one, and again, I don't know if this is like, the big leap and upper limit problem, like, is because I'm so fearful of becoming egocentric or becoming so detached from reality. Like I remember going to see Rachel Hollis in person back in her heyday. She got on the stage. She's like, my goal is to have a jet and a big house in Hawaii. And I'm like, man, you're unrelatable. But like her brand took off because she peed her pants on the trampoline. She was so relatable. And so one of my fears, and I don't know if I'm holding myself back, is like, shit. And like, am I so scared of crossing the line that all of these people seem to have crossed the line unbeknowing to them? I would like to think they didn't realize that they had become the monster that they weren't. I don't know. And so that's why I was asking that question.
Yeah. And if I can just speak to that just really briefly, there's a couple of things there that you're not seeing because of course you're not. It's you. You don't like, we're not terribly objective about ourselves all the time, right? But there is a degree of healthy ego that you must have to actively pursue dreams and goals that seem ridiculous to the average person.
Yes.
You must have a healthy ego.
Yeah.
That means you also are very self-aware. Okay. Right? Self-aware people are not narcissistic. Okay. Now, it's really important that you and I have talked about this, but that whoever's listening understands. There is a difference between having a character trait of narcissism, which lots of people have. I like to use presidents of the United States as an example. You have to have some degree of that trait just to be able to do the job, right? NPD, narcissistic personality disorder, is a whole other beast. And unfortunately, I think people use that interchangeably. They are not interchangeable. Okay. They're not. And so a personality disorder is rigid, it is fixed, it leaves a wake of destruction, regardless of which of the, personality disorders you have. And narcissistic personality disorder is one of the disorders people do not seek treatment for. Okay. Why? Because you're a narcissist. Whereas Many presidents have
Mm-hmm.
had very healthy advisors, therapists, mentors, people
Yeah.
that they turn to say, like, keep me in check, put me in check, give me an idea better than mine, that kind of thing. That's where you know you have a sense of self-awareness, you have healthy boundaries that keep you in check, or people that
Who
keep
help
you in
you?
check if you're not seeing what you're doing.
Okay.
Whereas NPD, people with NPD surround themselves with yes men and yes women.
Mm-hmm.
And the minute you are not a yes woman, you are out. And you're not only, sometimes it's not even that you're dead to the person, you become a target.
Oh, been there, done
Yeah,
that.
you
Oh,
become a
yeah, I
target.
compared it to if you've ever seen the movie Gladiator, where
Yes,
like they villainize the most popular, warrior of Rome, soldier of Rome, just to hide their own villainy.
yes.
I was like, that is literally what my experience was like when I left an organization that ironically was for female empowerment, but then internally very actively disempowered female staff. It was just
Bingo.
wild. It was wild.
And
It
the
was wild.
organizationally understand, and
Yeah.
MLMs are a really good example of this, just
Yeah.
because everybody's kind of familiar with the system of an
Yep.
MLM. That
Yeah.
system is designed purposefully. This is not like an afterthought in that system where you're like, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen. No, that's exactly why it's built that
Mm,
way,
mm, mm,
because
mm.
it insulates the leader, and usually his, but sometimes her, inner sanctum, so to
Yeah.
speak. But if you're
Yeah.
in the inner sanctum, do not think that you are
Mhm.
like free and clear, because the
Immune,
minute you
immune.
step out of
Yeah.
line, it's over for you.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
And so the reason I just want to finish on this note is,
Yeah.
this is why this happens to so many people, where they want to leave, but they're afraid to.
Yep.
And on top of it, they're
Yep.
not only ashamed they got themselves into this situation, they're ashamed they've stayed so long, so they
Yep.
don't talk to anybody else about it, because
Yep.
everybody else drank the Kool-Aid.
Yep.
And we tend to think that the other person is not experiencing what we're
Yep.
experiencing. So if
Yep.
I say this out loud, they're either going to rat me out, tell me I'm crazy, shame me, when in reality, the likelihood is the woman sitting next to you is having the same thing and she doesn't
Mm.
want to say anything.
Well, that's what happened when I did leave. That's when it was finally disclosed, and I was like, "Gosh, dang it!" Like no one talked about it. We were all kind of like suffering in silence with like
Yeah.
a
And
bad
this is one of the
coach.
reasons I wanted to have this conversation with you, because that is what's so insidious about this in marketing and business, but especially in any like self-help or help sort of focused
Mm-hmm.
business
Mm-hmm.
market or niche,
Mm-hmm.
coaching, consulting, mentoring,
Yeah.
training, events,
Yeah.
things like that, right?
Yeah.
Because that, and that's how they just keep going, because we don't talk about it. And when we do, people come out swinging. And they're I listen, I've been swung at so many times. We were laughing at the fact at dinner that I literally had it out with Dave Hollis on Instagram. Literally had it out with him, because I do not care. I
Rest
don't
in peace.
come for
Yes.
me. Like a narcissist and me, that would be just fun. It would be
Yeah.
fun, right?
Yeah.
The problem is, for most people, they don't feel educated or armed to handle not only a narcissist as an individual, but a narcissistic centered system
Mm,
that you
mm,
are now
mm,
part of.
mm.
And think about that in terms of being a team member, an
Yeah.
employee, a
Yeah.
contractor, an
Yeah.
affiliate.
Yeah.
Like, this gets messy really quickly. And it's why we have to talk about it more.
Well, and what I think I want your help is like, because, okay, let me just, hold on, let me articulate my thoughts, because like there's a lot going through my mind, because everything that you're saying again is just so ridiculously wildly validating. So I have that part of me that's like, I feel seen. And then there's like the podcast host of me that's like, continue on. I'm like, okay, so like, that's what literally is happening to people. But so I think what's so hard is that, like you said, on the facade, on the exterior of the building, it's very hard to detect good identity marketing, bad identity marketing
Yes.
sometimes. And this is where I, as an author of a book called Identity Marketing, I want to make sure that we're doing I'm doing a good job to warn the people. So like for me, the reason that that coach experience was so painful is because she positioned herself as the good one against the bad one. And that was why like a lot of us like chased after her, because we had already we could see so clearly what he was, and so we followed what she was, and then come to find out she was just as dangerous. And that was very, very hard, because the facade, the exterior, was wrapped so beautifully
Mhm.
in an integrity based identity marketing play. And I was like, oh my gosh, I finally found somewhere I can be safe to build this dream.
And we all want that, right? Like that's a human
Totally.
desires for the
Totally.
belonging.
100%.
Oh my gosh, the
100%.
belonging and the being seen. Yeah.
100%. And so I think that was what was so, I think, again, back to your whole self trust thing, that was why I was like, damn, how did I not see? I'm a freaking marketer. How did I not see this? Or how did I get disillusioned? Because, and I think part of it is because I wanted it so badly. So I also
Of
took
course.
myself in that direction, where the thing that she was fighting against, it was so clear. People were getting on Instagram and crying when they were removed from the community. Like they were like burning, or people were like crossing their names off of plaques. I mean, it's some pretty brutal stuff, right? So because the facade appears so lovely and even calls out, it's funny, a secret narcissist is calling out a public narcissist. We're like, what? So like that's where it's like, damn, this is like Inception. But like, how do we? How can you better discern? Like, I remember Gary Vee was on the stage recently and he was talking about like hiring is just guessing.
Yeah.
It's not about getting better at hiring, because at the end of the day, you don't know until you finally get to know. It's how quickly you not only hire and fire, but how fast you promote. So he's like, stop putting all the pressure on hiring, because that's just a glorified guessing. I'm like, damn, is that really how it is with these providers? Is that really how it is with these communities that you want to be a part of? Is there an element of guessing and then making sure there's legal clauses to get the hell out when you realize? Or how do you navigate facades that are just as beautiful on the outside but not so
Yeah.
much on the inside?
This is such a fantastic question, and I hate
Did I set it up right? Did it make
yeah,
sense?
and I hate my answer because I wish
Okay, great.
I wish I had a better one. But so, like I approach most things, there's a pragmatic piece, and then there's sort of the inner piece, right? So
Okay.
the pragmatic piece, and the thing I tell people all the time is, for example, if you need a very specific medical procedure, right?
Yeah.
And you're scared about it, and it could have big outcomes. You don't just go see one doctor. That's not best practice. It's best practice to get a second or a third opinion. And if the doctor gets pissed at you for getting a second opinion, well, then you've got your answer about that doctor, right? So I encourage people all the time, like, if you think I'm the person for you, great, let's have that conversation. And also, if you say to me, I'm also going to go have a conversation with so and so, I'm like, cool, let me know, because the outcome I'm looking for is for the match. It's the same thing as a psychotherapist. You can have five equally trained people, but it's the match and then the relationship that comes of it that really fosters the change, the growth, the transformation. So, we just may not be the best match. And I'm not going to try selling you anything if that's the way it is, right? So, number one, a new best practice for you might be interviewing,
Good.
you
Love.
know, and giving yourself some options, because marketing is one thing, but when you get into an actual conversation with somebody, it doesn't have to be like a crazy lengthy thing, but hop on like a 20-minute discovery call with three different people whose marketing you're attracted to or resonates with, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That's number one. Number two is move slowly than you would prefer.
Oof.
And I hate this one because on the Colby, I am a 9 quick start.
Fast start.
I like to do everything fast. But because the number of coaches in the last 5 years has doubled. Okay.
Damn.
And that's just the certified ones, not the
Yeah.
ones who are just like adding coach to their name,
Manifest.
right? Holy cow. It
Yeah.
really behooves you as a consumer to slow your buying process down just a little bit. I'm not talking about dragging it out or procrastinating, right? I'm saying do a paid workshop with them.
Yeah.
Just $200, $500,
Yeah.
right? Do their 90-day program instead of
Yeah.
signing up for a year, right? Really have something experiential so you can see what they're like in action, but
Oh,
even
good.
more importantly, what they're like in response. Because in marketing, it's not really about response. The response comes from the consumer, the buyer, not from the person marketing. So you want to be having in an experiential type situation so you can input and see how they receive and respond to that instead of jumping to the thing that you're like, oh my God, that sounds amazing. And I have to get in on that right now.
Again, Kelly, validation.
Oh, good.
That has literally been again, I'm not, this is not my area of expertise, but intuitively, it's exactly what I've decided to do
Mm-hmm.
in the last year, where like these people have these group containers or have these long-term containers, right? Call it what you want to call it. And I was like, before I ever sign up for 3 months with you, a year from you, or I sign up for an expensive thing with you, let's try out a little piece with you. It's like the chicken teriyaki on the stick
Yep.
at the, food court. And that's why I discovered in that hour with that lady, I'm like, well, I'm not going to hire her for a bigger container. But then at the same time, I had this like storytelling call with Matthew Dix. It was so good. It was so phenomenal. His follow up, his pre work. I'm like, what else can you sell me
Yeah.
at this point? Just sell me
Yeah.
everything. And he's like, well, I'm developing workshops. Like, I don't care. I'm being like, so it's so funny. Yes, I totally agree with you.
Yeah.
It's, I think the buyer has changed. The discernment is there. And so for us, before we jump into a relationship, let's just go on a date. Let's just see what happens first before
Absolutely. Because a date is a back and forth,
yeah.
right? A video is not. A PDF is not. I'm not saying there isn't value in that, right? I'm just saying if we have to change our buyer discernment. Right now, buyer psychology is wait, because everybody's gun shy. But we need wait, and then we need to get into action to get the support we need.
Yeah.
And we need a way to move through that process. So that what you just said is a beautiful bridge to the other piece, which is really an internal piece. And I'll give you an example. A few years ago, I got invited to go to a get together on Necker Island.
Oh.
And I had,
Necker Island.
Yeah. And I had been following kind of on the periphery what was going on, who were the women that were going. I didn't like that it was predominantly white women. There were a few things about it that I was like, And I liked a bunch of the women who were in the group. I knew them personally. They were lovely. And I got invited, and it's invite only. And I get that is very like, it's a draw for a lot of people, invite only. I understand that. It doesn't do anything for me, right?
Yeah.
But what really made the decision for me, even though there were so many appealing things, was my gut. Now, I refer to it as intuition. For me, I believe everybody has intuition. You're either very well connected to it or you're not. This is something I have worked on for years and years. And again, some people call it their connection to God, their connection to inner self. I don't care what you call it, right? It's just that deeper, wiser knowing. And it takes practice to connect to that. And the minute that person, who is somebody I love, adore, and trust, by the way, the minute she extended that invitation, I was like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And she was shocked. Shocked. How could you pass this up? And that's what's baked in, is that FOMO is so strong, right? And I was like, because my gut said no. There's no more, I don't give any more explanation or justification.
Yeah.
Is the minute my intuition says no, it is a hard pass for me. And I think too many of us have that inner knowing. Now, look, you may need to go away and sleep on it a couple of days, journal about it, pray on it, whatever your process is, right?
Yeah.
I literally feel things in my gut almost instantaneously. And I trust it, because when I don't, I make really, really big life-altering mistakes. But the key was learning to be comfortable with no explanation.
But your stomach is your second mind, no?
Correct.
That's what they say. Yeah, the way that literally how your body is actually compositionally made
in
up.
all the ways. You're right.
Yep. Gosh.
And
This
that's
is
hard.
probably, it's super hard because because other than just that feeling, there's no other reason. And you feel like you have to give them a good logical reason to not offend them or hurt their feelings, but you're like, I don't have a logical reason.
That is an upper limit.
Yeah.
That part is where you need to make a big leap, because
Yeah.
you don't owe anyone an explanation for any purchase you make
Get it, Kelly. Get it.
or not, or don't make.
Mm.
Right. Like, and again, even in that conversation, I was very grateful for the invitation. Like, oh, that's so lovely. You thought of me. I know you don't get 100 invitations and you thought to invite me. I was so appreciative of being thought
Yeah.
of. Do you know what I
Honored.
mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that doesn't mean it's the right thing for me. And I made
Yeah.
sure I expressed it that way. But it's no, because it's no is an answer.
I just had this experience. Selena Sue is a new friend of mine, and she recently invited me to this kind of like private little group that she's compiling. And she started showing me some of the people that were attending, and one of those is the people that hurt me. And so I reached out to her and I'm like, gosh, I love you so much. And I would love to participate in this. I've really enjoyed getting to know you in the short time that we've had together. And I can't do it because I don't feel safe. The time that she took to sit with me, to not coerce me or push me. It was the conversation around the thing was over. It was like, "Are you okay? Have you sought help?"
Yes.
Like it would. I'm like, I don't even know this. I'm just so wildly impressed with how she even handled the fact that she's now the negative recipient of somebody else's actions. That sucks. And it wasn't about her, and it wasn't about the container. It was like, from person to person, are you okay still? And I'm like, wow. So I know what there are, you guys, there are good ones out there.
Yeah.
And don't lose hope. There are good ones out there. Take your time and date. I think that's fantastic. Okay, Kelly, we do this thing on the podcast where the last question is yours to ask because you are
This
just.
is so great. And I feel narcissistic asking this, just so you know.
Okay. Okay.
I find the way our friendship started to be
Yeah.
so fascinating to me,
Okay.
right? Like
Okay.
everything for me is through a psychological lens always.
Yeah.
Even when I'm trying not to, I can't even
Yeah.
help it.
I know. It's like me in marketing. I get it.
Yeah. Yeah, which I've seen, because you'll be like, wait, can I just give you an idea? And I'm like, yes, all the ideas. But my question for you is, what was that from your perspective that made you go, her, she's one of the ones? Because I am so outrageously picky about people. It always intrigues me when somebody like points at me and goes, you. So I'd love to hear that.
Well, and I have and you know this because I've been honest. I've had someone in your position, which is more not the marketing strategist or technician, but it's like the internist is what I mean, like the broadest way of categorizing what you do. You're this internist. So I've had internist level support within my group programs.
Mm-hmm.
And then I met you and I was like, oh shit. There's that, and then there's this.
Yeah.
What is this? And so I'll let me see if I can concisely kind of like express to you what it is that I saw. One, you are unapologetic on your stance, even if you don't even check to know, like you don't check, how do I say this? Sometimes people will test the waters to see where I stand on issue before then they kind of tell me their stance. You don't do that. This is where I stand ethically, morally on this issue, regardless of I don't care where you stand. This is a non-negotiable. So I noticed that immediately. You don't test the waters to see if you should temper yourself.
No.
You are you. By the way, not everybody loves that. I love that. I love that. I love that deeply. So that was it's probably one of the first things I noticed about you. You didn't tread, you didn't temp, you didn't nope. This is who you are.
Okay, interesting.
So there was that. The other thing that I think you are and this is more on a professional affirmation, like you are very, very good at articulating hard things or difficult things to understand. Like it reminds me of the Andrew Hubermans of the world, where you can be like this wild genius scientist, but somehow you can articulate it for the stupid people at home. That's like, what the hell does that mean? So and you don't make me feel dumb that I feel dumb, So there's that. Even at the table, we're like, am I a narcissist? Like, honey, like the fact that you're asking me to know. I'm like, oh, okay. So like, and it wasn't condescending, and it wasn't rude, and it wasn't mean, and it wasn't even like, oh, you young little girl. Like,
Oh
it wasn't
God,
even
no.
an ageism thing too. It was just like, you're just so sweet, but also, man. And the third thing is, you're just a joy and fun, and you make me laugh, and I don't know, you're self-deprecating. Yes, you are critical of providers who do not live to the creeds that you believe in,
Mhm.
but you are wildly open to just jabbing fun at yourself. You're like, I'm the oldest person at this table, and then my other person was like, no, I
I
am.
know.
Like,
And
it
she
was
put me
so
right in my place. She's like,
yeah.
back up. You're not the oldest one. Sit down. And I was like, all right, I'm good.
I
Okay.
know. And so, like, for strong personalities, which you are and I am too, sometimes the strength is really a mask for massive insecurity.
Yeah.
You are not that. You are actually a really strong person, and you can take it. And that's really refreshing, because a lot of people cannot, even though they appear to be a really strong dynamic.
That is, I'm so glad I asked that question, because
Mm-hmm.
thing number 2,
Mm-hmm.
I would never say about myself, nor would I ever think it about
Sure.
myself. It's actually a criticism I have of myself. So it's
Oh.
so interesting to me to hear you say that. Also, like, I
Mm-hmm.
receive it with such gratitude and
Mm-hmm.
appreciation, because sometimes when people mirror something to you that doesn't match, you just want to
Mm-hmm.
dismiss it out of hand really
Sure.
quickly. Like, they're just
Sure.
being nice, or they're just making up. And I feel like my job as part of my growth is to trust the people I trust in what they're saying. Right. So I so appreciate you telling me that. Thank
Well,
you.
I don't lie. You don't lie, and I don't lie.
Truth.
So that's honestly, like, that was my impression of the force that is Kelly.
The fourth.
And I am here. I like just to be in your orbit energetically. If no one's actually physically been in your presence, you can feel it. Like, you can, even when walking up and parking your cars, and then, come here, bitch, give me a hug. Like just to be in your aura, just to be in your
Aw,
presence, is to consider yourself a very lucky person. So the fact that you live in Wake Forest, and I'm just, hop skipping away in Apex, is like the gift of gifts. So thank you.
that's so humbling. I really appreciate that. And
It's so fun.
you like me are not big on the fluffy compliments for the sake of compliments. And so that hits me very
No.
hard, and I appreciate it.
Well, I love you. I'm
Love you
grateful
back.
for you being on the podcast, and for it's just so funny. Okay, let me tie this up because I'm professional. Kelly, thank you for being on today's Rainmaker podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved this discussion, and I can't wait for your book to get in people's hands, mine especially.
Thanks, sister. Thanks for listening today. If you've loved what you heard, make sure to rate the show, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us get the Rainmaker podcast in front of more passionate marketers just like you. And if you're ready to transform your marketing from buy this to be this, pick up my new identity marketing book, available on my website at veronicarami.com. Until next time, my friends, keep making it rain.